Welcome, foolish mortals. Take your loved ones by the hand, please. There's no turning back now.
Welcome to the show. We're recording live at the Oregon Ghost Conference this weekend, and I'd like to welcome our first guest ever, Neil McNeill. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Doing well. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks. I'm glad to be guest number one.
Guest
Thank you
number
very much.
one.
That's quite an honor.
Groundbreaking.
I feel like I should break some champagne over something.
So tell us about yourself. What got you into this?
What got me into this? Actually, I've been, like most people, I've been interested in the paranormal since I was a little kid. And it really wasn't until my early 20s I had a chance meeting with a fellow by the name of Lloyd Auerbach, who is a parapsychologist and a ghostbuster. And I didn't realize that you could do this for a living. This was like, brand new idea to me at that time. And the other thing that I didn't realize was that as he was explaining to me, there's an actual science behind the paranormal. I mean, scientists for 130 years have been studying this stuff, and they have some pretty decent ideas and theories about what's really going on, and that just kind of started me off on my path. So for me, the last 20 years has been about trying to keep on top of all the new discoveries, the new theories, what parapsychology is doing, where it's going, and more importantly, how can I relate that to what ghost hunters and paranormal investigation groups are doing out in the field, getting them information from a scientific point of view that they probably should have.
So let me ask you about the science, because my understanding of the problem with the science in this is that science is looking to be able to recreate things pretty standardly. And that's not necessarily something that happens in this field very often. So tell me a little bit about...
Yeah, generally, you don't go to a haunted house and expect it to perform for you at 6 p.m., ghosts don't punch time clocks, that sort of thing. So repeatability has always been an issue with what we call the spontaneous phenomena, which is the stuff that we experience in our everyday lives, the stuff that happens out in the field when we're doing our investigations. To counter that, this is where parapsychology actually came from. To counter that, back in the 1930s, a laboratory was actually set up here in the U.S. at Duke University. And through their research and their experiments, they were able to conduct a scientific view of what's actually going on. They were able to literally put it under a microscope and have a controlled way of observing these phenomena. And it began to answer the repeatability issue. For the skeptics that are out there that say, there's absolutely no evidence for this stuff to exist, you can't, the repeatability issue is too great, we never get satisfactory repetition on any of these experiments. That just isn't the case. They're really not doing their research. The Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory alone did 5 million tests in psychokinesis, which showed that there was a statistical variance from average.
Wow.
That there is something going on. The state of parapsychology at this point is not, it's the difference between proof versus process research. We've proved it as far as we're concerned. 130 years worth of empirical data, empirical evidence, something is going on.
Right.
We're not sure what it is, so now we're turning to the process. What exactly?
Trying to figure it out.
Exactly.
Right.
What's the mechanism behind this? Why is this happening? What's actually going on?
Well, that's kind of what we say is that, 99% of the time you can debunk something, there's still 1% of the time, which means there's something there.
Of course.
There has to be something there. That's,
Right. And that's something we tell our clients. That's why we have that open door policy with every case that we do. We love the opportunity to go back to a specific location, whether it be a business or a home, so we can continue researching the phenomena and documenting it. And we always tell our clients, keep a logbook, and every time something happens, it doesn't matter what it is. If you can't explain it, write it down and see if there's a pattern.
Exactly.
Because ghosts don't just come out at night like you think they do because you see it on TV.
Right. They don't go Hollywood. They don't do that just for
I
us.
like that,
Yeah. And probably most of I'm sure you guys are familiar with Harry Price, who was a member of the Society for Psychical Research, and he was able to investigate the Borley Rectory, the most haunted house in England back in the 1930s, and he basically rented the place for a year.
Now that's the rectory that has the famous brick floating photo.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am familiar with that place.
And so he was literally able to investigate this place continuously for a year. That doesn't happen that often, and that's part of the reason why we're kind of at the point where we're at with field investigation, because we don't get those opportunities.
Right.
It's like you say, if you've got a client and you're able to go back several times,
right,
that's a real boon for us, because we can observe over a long period of time to see
right,
what the real behavior of the phenomenon is. I'm very lucky because 10 years ago I was contacted by the property management company of a town up here called Port Gamble, outside
We're on
of
their
Seattle,
newsletter.
Washington. Yeah. And I never left. I've been investigating the entire town for 10 years.
Wow.
And it's kind of my laboratory in the field, especially the Walker Ames Mansion. Those of you up here in the Northwest may have heard of this building. It's been fascinating to be able to go back time after time and see how the phenomena have changed. What's new? What's going away? What's coming back? It kind of goes through this transformation process, and it's just an amazing experience to be able to do that. Very, very lucky to have that as a resource.
So, what was the point when the big experience that told you there's something to this? Like, do you have one really good story?
Oh, the aha moment. Yeah. The aha moment when it's like, oh, this really isn't garbage. Yeah. It was a vicarious experience, probably the one that I can point to. It wasn't a first-hand experience. It wasn't my experience, but I mentioned that I had initially met Lloyd Auerbach. At the time,
that could be anybody's aha moment.
Well, yeah, it was pretty spectacular at the time. I didn't know who he was, but he was on the teaching staff at JFK University for a graduate program in parapsychology that was being taught at the time. And he very graciously invited me to sit in on one or two of the lectures. And I saw some video that just absolutely astounded me. I couldn't explain it. I've got a parapsychologist who, has a background in cultural anthropology and coming at this from a scientific point of view. And what I saw in that video was just amazing to me. And that pretty much told me right then and there, there's something to this. It isn't just the stuff that you see in the movies. It isn't the Stephen King novels. It's not
right,
the entity on television, all that sort of thing.
Right.
This is real. This is as real as it gets. And so that was kind of my wake up call, was that, wow, this is real, and wow, this is really cool, and I need to get in on this, any way I can.
Excellent.
So yeah, that was kind of my experience.
What was your background in before this? Were you in the science, or were you?
No, actually, I don't have a degree in parapsychology. I don't consider myself a parapsychologist. My background was just like most people. I just had an interest in paranormal phenomena since the time that I was a little kid. But I've done a lot of research in psychology and counseling and all kinds of things. I'm pretty much self-taught, I guess you could say.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, aren't we all to a greater or lesser degree? So I think one of the really interesting things about parapsychology is that it's multidisciplinary. Mm-hmm. So in order to explain the stuff that we're actually talking about, we have to go to a number of different disciplines. We need answers from physics. We need answers from biology. We need answers from psychology and all of these other disciplines, all these other sciences, in order to answer the question, because it's not going to be just one science that does it. Mm-hmm. So really, people that come to parapsychology or paranormal investigation from a more professional or scientific level generally have some kind of background. They've got a favored background, whether that's anthropology or medicine or whatever. So it's kind of one of those things. We need everybody in this, and so the door is open that way. We need all different kinds of backgrounds,
including the skeptics, because
including
it makes
skeptics.
us work even harder.
Absolutely,
at our job.
Absolutely,
and it shows us where we need. It shows us where we need to fill in.
Yeah,
and it shows us the areas where. Okay, this is where we're a little weak. We need to focus on that and find out what they're looking at.
That's kind of the definition of science. You go in with an open mind, and if something doesn't, the data isn't fitting your particular hypothesis, then you go back to the drawing board.
Change your hypothesis.
That's what science is all about. So, absolutely.
When I hear paranormal investigation, parapsychology, I might be reading it wrong, but I think psychic. That's where I go almost instantly.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily. I don't hear you claiming that, but I wonder how much does that work into the parapsychology field.
Well, actually, the phenomena that we tend to call psychic phenomena, that is the things like telepathy and precognition and all of that.
Telekinesis.
And telekinesis or psychokinesis. Yeah. That is what parapsychology is all about. That's how it started. It wasn't parapsychology to begin with. It was actually called psychical research. And that came out of the spiritualist era, where you had all of these claims of fantastic phenomena going on in the seance rooms, and a group of scholars on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean decided that they were going to get together and make a concerted effort to actually investigate this stuff and see whether there was any validity to it. And they began the Society for Psychical Research and the American Society for Psychical Research, and that's basically what they were investigating, were claims of psychic phenomena, of ESP, of psychokinesis, and of survival of death. And they were going out into the field.
Did you say survival of death?
Survival of death.
So people, near-death experience, is that? Near-death
experience, out-of-body experience, reincarnation, mediums, and communication with the dead. Yeah, those kinds of things.
Cool.
And so that's what they were doing. They were literally going out into the field just like we do, just like investigation groups do. They were actually going and getting their information from the source. And so it wasn't really until the 1930s when a more controlled environment was desired to take a look at these phenomena. That's where we got, the parapsychology laboratory at Duke University. That's when it became parapsychology. It actually sort of turned into its own science at that point. So yeah, it covers all of those things. It covers everything that we consider to be psychic phenomena. The technical term is psi phenomena, and for a while there, from the 1930s to about the 1970s, ghosts and hauntings and poltergeists were sort of out of luck. You couldn't put them under a microscope. You couldn't invite them into the laboratory per se.
Right.
So there really was no point in researching them. And fortunately for us, folks like Tony Cornell and D. Scott Rogo and Lloyd Auerbach and Barry Taff, all these people, during that period of time, were going back out into the field.
Mobile labs.
And taking what we knew from the laboratory, mixing it with what the psychical researchers had done, and creating a whole new branch, if you will, for parapsychology. For instance, parapsychologist, well-known parapsychologist by the name of Gertrude Schmiedler, was the very first to actually go into haunted houses using floor plans, using psychics, sending them in one at a time, correlating their data along with environmental sensors. It was the first time that had ever been done. Nobody had thought to do that before. And, of course, that's the model on which we base paranormal investigation today.
Right.
Interesting. So then, how do you use this in real life applications? Let's say a client calls you in and says, "We've got something going on in the house. Model or our technique is to go in and try and debunk, and we set up the cameras and we set up the audio and we do all sessions and we take notes, and I'm wondering, is there a different approach that you take to an investigation?
Not that much different. I'm pretty what I call front end heavy, which is the phone rings and it's invariably you're going to think I'm crazy, but and then the story comes out. What I like to do is have an interview with them at that point to try to get as much information from them as is humanly possible about what's going on, what they think is going on, how many people have experienced it, what they think is going on, and what they want done about it. That's really kind of important to find out what their idea of resolution is going to be, because that's going to inform how you go about doing the investigation. And probably like what you guys do, if it sounds like it's rodents under the porch, or if it sounds like it's just the HVAC system acting up or something like that, you can deal with it from that point of view. But if it starts to sound like there are hallmarks of a poltergeist case, or it sounds more along the lines of a haunting, or there may be an apparition going on, then I kind of change my tack a little bit, ask a few more questions, and then go in and do a preliminary investigation where we interview everybody again and have them keep a logbook and a journal and all those kinds of things. So, yeah, it's not that much different. It really isn't that much different. Really, the only difference is getting the data. How are we going to interpret that? Am I going to just take this data and say, well, this is paranormal for sure, because I don't have any other explanation for it, when really there's this other science that may have another view of it, i.e. parapsychology might be able to give you some insight into what else might be going on, rather than going along the route of, it's a demonic entity, bringing belief in religion into it, making it a little less scientific, going off in other tangents and other directions.
So we tend to get mostly demonic entities.
Do you? Isn't that amazing?
Phone calls from people who watch the Sci-Fi Channel a lot.
I really wish Raid would put out some kind of demonic spray that you could, get rid of your demonic infestation.
They do have it, but you can only buy it at church.
That must be it. Right.
So, and I'll use our group as an example because we haven't worked with too many. With their model, but when we're doing our historical research, we don't like to necessarily go in knowing what that research is, because we don't want to have that preconceived information to maybe muddy what our goal is when we're going in there.
Right.
Do you guys tend to like to know the history before you go in, or do you like to look at it after you've been in and then start maybe tying the
piecing things together? I've done both approaches. When I started off in a couple of investigation groups myself, and we did different approaches that way. Usually, if we're dealing with psychics and mediums, they go in blind, and they'll tell you that they don't want that information. They don't want the preconceived idea, the preconceived notion, and we'll probably only have one or two people that are in charge of doing that background research to have that information, so that again, whatever data you're collecting on site, you're not automatically interpreting it.
Right.
Just the facts, ma'am. That's all we're trying to do. So, I myself, I don't do quite so much field research anymore, because I'm more along the lines of the educational side of things at this point. But when that's what I was doing, that's generally how it was done. And that's how I teach my classes. These classes that I run, I'm hopefully educating people on how to go about doing their research and their investigations more appropriately, more responsibly. That's really the name of the game. And making sure that we're all using the same terminology, the same resource material, because there's a lot of variations going on right now, and if we can kind of all be on the same page, it just helps.
Right. I want to ask you two questions. One about, both of them about something you just talked about. One about bringing psychics in and working in a house, and that's kind of a two-part question. And then I do want to ask you about the education and the classes you put on, because I know you're out there teaching people about this stuff. So the first part of the psychic question is, how do you know how do you vet your psychics? How do you know the good ones versus the maybe not so fair ones? And then what do you tell a family or a client or whoever who is like, I don't want psychics in my house, or I'm kind of worried about this because I think it's going to bring this in there. How do you talk to people, and how do you explain that to them?
I do encourage using psychics and mediums. There's a difference between a psychic and a medium. A psychic is only getting impressions using ESP, very important stuff. A medium is actually in contact with the dead. Okay. That's the difference between the two of them. They're not technically interchangeable that way. I highly recommend that any group find themselves a psychic or a medium or both to work with. How do you actually find out whether they're good or not? You look at their track record. If they are part of an organization like the Wind Bridge Institute, which is a group that basically certifies psychics and mediums for use with police departments and law enforcement departments across the U.S., they've got a very high standard. So if they're a member of a group like that, that tells you that they're pretty legitimate. For those who don't have that kind of a track record or background, I've worked with psychics who were new to the idea of paranormal investigation, and you just work with them. You bring them on cases, and you start seeing, are they getting hits? Can you validate what they're coming up with? Right. The information, does it check out? And that's really the best way, and the only way, to get an accurate reading on how well a psychic can perform that way. Because as we all know, and any psychic or medium will tell you, we all have our off days. It's not a consistent thing. Otherwise, psychics would be millionaires. They'd be breaking the market at every chance that they can. It just, for whatever reason, the phenomena doesn't work that way. It's not at will for the most part. So we just work with them to try to create their own track record. Just keep the protocols the same and do everything the same every investigation. If you're going to send the psychics in on their own for the first 15 minutes, have them fill out the form exactly the same way, and using the exact same terminology and language, so that you've got consistency. And then over time, you can actually take a look and say, wow, this person's getting a lot of hits, or maybe they're getting a lot of hits under these conditions. And so you can kind of work to their strengths that way. As for what do you tell the clients? Depends on the case, and it depends on the clients. I've worked with clients that were resistant to having psychics or mediums used in the investigation. You always want to work within the client's comfort level. Sure. That's why you're there. You're there to help them. So you work with them on that level. I've managed to counsel some clients that way and say, look, this isn't going to open up some kind of interdimensional gateway, and Satan's spawn isn't going to come out of the toilet, and all that sort of thing. And
you already have demons. So
they're already here. So what's the problem? Come on. So sometimes that works and sometimes that doesn't. It really depends on what the client is comfortable doing. So you hope for the best. You try to educate them. Most psychics or mediums are more than happy to answer the questions before even going in. If the client has questions about what is this going to do, how is this going to go. Hopefully you've got those answers already, and you can just kind of provide them for the client to put them at ease and let them know that psychics and mediums are just another tool. They're just like your thermal camera, they're just like your digital recorders. It's just another data gathering method. Right. And you don't give any more credence to their evidence than you would to any other piece. You correlate all possible bits of data, and you see where the overlap is, and that's where you concentrate.
Well, and all those tools are designed to help actually, the audio, the video, it's enhancing our own senses, so somebody who has psychic ability,
it's just another way of augmenting different senses.
You brought up another, you keep talking and bringing up, I want to get to the education. Do you work with new psychics? Psychics who are kind of new and they're kind of cutting their teeth in this? Have you ever worked with them? And then clairvoyant, clairaudient. Is there a certain type of psychic ability that's more useful to you in the field?
That's a good question. I've dealt with first-time mediums and first-time psychics. They usually already know kind of where their strengths are, what their abilities are at that point, whether they want to admit it or not. And basically, it's just like working with virtually any other, breaking in a new member of your group, you just work with them. Here's what we do, and you just kind of shadow them and put them through the paces. And usually that's okay. There really isn't, for me, there hasn't been any magic sequence of making that better for the psychic. And they'll either take to it or they won't. So again, you work within their abilities and their parameters. And as far as are there any particular abilities that are better than any others? Boy, that's like trying to pick your favorite superhero. Thor is better than Spider-Man because I
have my own favorite superhero.
The thing is that there are a number of different abilities, whether you're talking about telepathy, clairaudience, clairvoyance, clairsentience, psychometry. All of these things have their value. No psychic, I've never worked with a psychic that can do them all, everybody's got their strengths and everybody's got their weaknesses. And so there are some psychics that are much better at seeing things. They're much better clairvoyants than they are psychometrists. So if I need for somebody to be able to read the history of a location, I'm going to work with somebody who's a psychometrist who can do that, who has that impression. And, it's not mutually exclusive. Sometimes people have more than one ability. I don't think any of them are any more important than any others. I myself consider myself
very politically correct answer.
It's, I've been doing this for 20 years. You learn how to do it. No, but that really is the truth. I don't really think that there's one particular psychic ability that stands out, head and shoulders above any other.
So you work with multiple different.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
That's great.
And I've worked with, and again, if you don't just limit yourself to mediums. Bring in a psychic, bring in a medium, somebody who really can communicate with the dead and has that ability through whatever means, whether that's channeling or automatic writing or, speaking in tongues. I've worked with all of those. And they can all have their uses and they can all be very, very effective. So it's just, choose what's most appropriate or what's at hand and work with that.
I think that's been something that we've been resistant to.
Yeah.
Working with psychics.
Originally, when we started out, it was nothing. And over the years, the more we get into this, we start, we got to have an open mind when it comes to this stuff. And we've learned that just in the small amount of time that we've been doing this.
And good for you. I know a lot of groups who just absolutely balk at doing that. And my question is, if you're going to be using, that they say that that's subjective evidence. Well, all evidence that we're getting is subjective. I mean, that's that is science. As much as we like to think that it's objective, it's not.
Right.
So my question becomes then, why wouldn't you avail yourself to one more piece of data?
Sure.
That could potentially correlate. Your temperature drop, your EMF spike at the same time that a medium is in contact with somebody. That's statistically significant.
Well, I think
why wouldn't we use that?
I'll answer that.
Okay, there we go.
And at least from my perspective, the big fear is, and I definitely know that there are credible people out there, but I think there's also been this, in the culture and the media, a painting of the not so credible, the cold readings, the just, I feel this, and there's no corroboration.
The ones who fish for the answers.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I mean, and the whole, that whole part of the phenomena started from a lot of hoaxing, which was the spiritualist era. There were a number of charlatans out there just cashing in. And it was all literally, that's where we get the term parlor tricks.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely take your point, and it can be a tough line to walk.
Yeah.
But if you're pretty vigilant about it and your protocols are pretty solid, then go for it. Yeah.
That's great. All right. Tell me about the education.
The education.
So here's the story I'm telling myself, and you tell me if this is true or not.
Okay.
I don't know if we don't charge for an investigation, and moving from the most of the psychics and mediums I've talked to usually charge. So that would cost something to a group. I'm imagining that you can charge for classes, education classes, and that might offset the price of equipment and paying people to be there.
Right.
And so that might be a nice segue into tell me about the education.
Tell me about the education. Yes, I do charge for my classes. Unfortunately, I can't. I'm not a multimillionaire.
Do you charge for investigations?
I don't charge for investigations. I never have.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't. To me, that's a whole world of ethics.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
That I don't like to get into.
Yep.
There are very few people that are out there in the business that who do charge that I think have a right to charge, just simply because they've been in the business for so long and they've written the Bibles basically that we're all following. So and let's face it, parapsychology doesn't pay a heck of a lot.
No.
I don't think most people know, but there are less than 50 full-time parapsychologists in the world.
Wow.
You've got a better shot of being a rock star than you have of being a full-time parapsychologist in research. That's just the breaks.
Let's start a band instead.
Yeah,
Let's start a band.
You call it the parapsychologist.
There you go.
So the education part of this came about because I particularly feel that there's a need to merge the two worlds of the folks that are out in the field, seeing what they see on television, trying to find out what the truth really is and how to go about doing all this stuff, and the folks that have been doing it for 130 years and actually do have some answers that are viable, but it's all in academic ease and very difficult to pull out from statistical analysis what all this stuff really means. So I've always kind of felt I've been sort of that conduit, if you will, of trying to translate that stuff and bring the two worlds together to make it easy to understand what parapsychology is really about and how you can actually apply it to your ghost investigations and give yourself a little bit more credibility, do things a little bit more responsibly. I didn't have the idea to teach these classes at first. I was approached by a community college, by Shoreline Community College in the Seattle area 5 years ago. They said, we'd love for you to come and do a one-evening lecture. I turned it around at them and I said, I'd love to do a whole class. They said, let's do it. I said, great. It was supposed to run once. 5 years later, I'm teaching. I've got a full course that's made up at this point of 9 classes, 2 core classes and a whole bunch of electives, and you can mix and match. And that's really how the whole thing started.
How many? Say that again.
I've got 2 core classes.
2 core classes.
Paranormal Studies 1, Paranormal Studies 2.
Okay.
And then there are a number of elective classes that we have, things like hotspots of Washington and anatomy of a séance, and all of these kinds of things that are related,
right,
to the phenomenon, to the field. So people can kind of mix and match and take them in whatever order they like and wherever their interests lie. But the whole idea of it is to present information that the general public isn't aware of and doesn't have easy access to. It's trying to give them that ability to be able to access all of this wonderful information that we've had for 130 years. That's going to be a treasure trove, really, for any ghost enthusiast that's out there.
Right. So before we close with you, how plug your website. How do people get a hold of you?
I feel bad that we haven't been plugging it the entire time.
Well, that's okay. If people want to get a hold of me, if they're psychic, they can just send me a telepathic transmission, and that'll work really nicely. If not,
send that to Neil McNeill. Yeah, courtesy of his brain.
Right. So you can go to neilmcneill.com. That's NeilMcNeill.com. neilmcneill.com. The program is called Paranormal Studies. I've just put together the organization Paranormal Studies Institute, which is the kind of the corporation, if you will, that's overseeing all of these classes and all of this wonderful stuff. That's how they can get a hold of me. I teach classes throughout the Seattle area at a number of different locations, and they can find those classes on my website. I update them quarterly. And last but not least, just last fall, I put out an educational DVD called Dark and Stormy Nights Parapsychology for Ghost Hunters.
Which you're selling here today,
Which
right?
I am selling here today. And that's basically the core concepts of the Paranormal Studies classes. the basics of parapsychology, what every good ghost hunter should really know about the science, and it's kind of an easy way to take it home with you. And
what if you're not a
meditate
ghost
on it.
hunter? What if you're a paranormal investigator?
If you're a paranormal investigator, see, there's that thing. It's like, do we call ourselves ghost hunters? Do we call ourselves paranormal investigators? I don't
Investigators
care.
and researchers.
It doesn't matter to me. I take everybody, so it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I designed both the course and the DVD to be accessible to anybody with an interest in the paranormal. You don't have to be a member of a group. You don't have to be actively
Right.
investigating. This is meant for everybody.
Are you the only professor? Are you a professor?
I'm not a professor. No, I'm
we
not.
call you professor?
I look like one. I play one on TV.
And now the radio.
And now the radio. There we go. So no. I like I said, I don't hold a degree in parapsychology. I don't have a tenured position. So several of my colleagues would chafe at that if they knew that I was being called a professor. So let's not go there.
Well, informally, I'll call you the professor.
Thanks,
You're my professor.
Okay.
Are you the
accept
only one
that.
teaching that, or is there
Yes.
other people that are teaching as well?
It's a one-man band, as far as I'm concerned. I know that there are other people around the country that do similar
right.
things.
But for this
other
program,
classes.
it's
for
you.
paranormal studies. It's all me, and that's it.
All right,
Yeah.
college counselor, administrator.
A lot of hats.
Registrar.
Gotta wear a lot of hats. Yeah, all the administrative stuff.
Very cool, very cool.
Well, I want to
thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank you very much for being our first guest.
Absolutely, my
This
pleasure.
is exciting. I've been wanting to meet you for quite a while, and so this is a treat.
And I wish you well in this endeavor.
Thank
I think this is an excellent thing. I think you're doing a wonderful thing for the community at large.
you.
And more people should be doing what you're doing.
I agree.
As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you.
thank you.
Any last thing that you want to tell anybody? I mean, plug your stuff again.
I'll just neilmcneil.com,
There you go.
Paranormal Studies, the DVD, and here's my log off line. Keep the normal in the paranormal.
Ah,
That's it.
I like it.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Neil.
You're listening to Oregon Paranormal Radio.
All right, we're sitting here with Ben Robison from Port. What is Port? How did Port start? How did you get into the field?
Well, probably like a lot of us. I mean, I had things happen growing up to me that were, mystifying but scary. And because of the way I was raised in a very open, environment, accepting and embracing the spiritual end of, life, essentially. From tarot cards to pendulums to, crystals, cemetery tag, all that.
Cemetery tag.
Yeah.
What's cemetery? I don't know. Oh, cemetery tag.
Yeah.
Took me a second.
So those things, I think, combined kind of formed, me believing and being open to this. Not only that, I wasn't raised around, being extremely fearful of it. I mean, there were times that I think all of us can say we've been fearful of those events, but overall, we talked about it. It was a conversation that could be had without people freaking.
Where'd you grow up?
All over. I'm from here. I was born in Portland, raised in mostly Washington, but I lived in California, Idaho, Wyoming.
Wow.
So yeah. So I've been around the block a few
Army?
times. No, you would think that.
Yeah.
You'd totally think I was an Army brat. We were poor, broke. I don't know. We were probably
It's the spectrum. You're either in the army or you're poor.
we were either probably running from drug lords or I don't know. But
We want to know that story.
Right.
Forget the paranormal stuff.
That's interesting. It wasn't, but okay, so for me, I was raised around that, but then I got older and I started, focusing on a family and career, and I found myself, I think, doing what a lot of us do sociologically, which is just get focused, and we kind of put on like a tunnel vision kind of thing, blinders, and I just went about my day-to-day life and focusing on that. So it wasn't until, admittedly, Ghost Hunters comes out, starts doing it, and I was like, now I like that.
You're honest about it. You're honest about it.
Absolutely, because I hated the British shows growing up. They were like, in the spooky mansion, you're like, oh my God, and they've got people like, what's her name, Linda Blair or whatever. And I can't stand that stuff.
No, we want to go on record as saying we love Linda Blair. We're going to go on record.
We love you, Linda.
I love her as a person.
There you go.
I don't like the show she was in and involved in because it was so corny.
I see, I get it.
But so, Ghost Hunters comes along and they have a very scientific approach, a very organized, and that's what I focused on. Not so much the actual, knowing that there's Hollywood involved in this and that a lot of this is going to ultimately be about getting ratings and manufacturing whatever they can do to do that.
Yeah.
So I studied for the first 2 seasons watching them, and I was like, and so I started thinking very heavily, I would like to do this. I would like to delve into this. I have a brother, one of my brothers, and him and I used to love watching horror movies, and he was loving the Ghost Hunter show, and I started playing around with the idea of, hey, maybe me and John can, start something. And then I got to realizing John would be the first guy to go screaming like a girl out of that place. Now, if you saw my brother, you would
Casey.
never...
How dare you?
He's a biker-looking dude. Bald head, big guy, tattoos. You would think he'd be the manly man.
I have a theory on this. The more tattoos and the more the tall, the bigger the biker, right? You're you can deal with anything. You can fight anybody. I can beat up anybody I see, right? Mm-hmm. But you can't beat up what you can't see. You can't beat up what's not there,
right?
So that's something that they can't fight. So they become terrified, and they go running and screaming.
Zach Baggins is a perfect example of that. He gets beat up all the time, I think, by. Well, I don't really know what by, but...
The online forums.
Right. Nice. That's a good quip. I quickly skipped my brother. John, I'm not doing that with you. And he's like, oh, okay. And he just kind of accepted it.
Yeah.
But then my wife at the time, her cousin John, he's a school teacher over in the Walla Walla area. And so him and I actually started really talking heavily about it. And because he was so thorough and so, detailed about everything, I was like, this is a good fit.
What did he teach?
English.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
So we were unlike most paranormal groups that started up. Our first probably 9 months was not about getting a case. It was actually me and him creating documentation, our preliminary questionnaires, our investigation permission forms, our mission statement, all that stuff. We were so focused on, we wanted that foundation to start with. And admittedly, the afterthought was actually to become registered as a 501c3. Let me try that again. A 501c3 in Washington and Oregon, which happened relatively soon afterwards. But it was really about our internal structure.
Right.
So
that's smart. That's really smart.
Yeah, I feel like it's really helped. But we didn't take the first case until later in 2008. And so that's when I tell people all the time, I'm like, we really started in 2008 when in fact it was probably at the very tail end of 2007 that it really kind of started. But anyways, that's how I got into it and kind of the very beginnings of Port and its
And what does PORT stand for?
The Paranormal and Occult Research Team.
Okay.
Which, with all due credit, my ex-wife, Sarah, I had sat down and I was like, well, originally we thought we were going to move. We were living in Central Oregon and I was out of a job and I was traveling back and forth from Oregon to up here, Portland area, and then out Walla Walla where John lived himself.
It's a lot of traveling.
Yeah, and I was trying to get a job, and we thought we were going to end up in Walla Walla, so John and I were like, well, let's go with, the first name we came up with was Blue Mountain Paranormal, which I liked, but knowing me, I'm kind of anal, and I want to have a unique, name and stand out. I started Googling. And there was a group out on the East Coast that had Blue Mountain Paranormal. Mm-hmm. So I was like, nah, let's not do that. So then I started, asking people, let's come up with something. So people started brainstorming, and Sarah actually was the one that came up with the acronym PORT, which I just absolutely loved. And I was like, that's a winner right there. So obviously I went out and started Googling. Now, if you were to do that now, I promise you will find groups out there with identical names, Paranormal and Occult Research Team down in the South and all that. But they were after us.
Right.
You know?
Okay.
But I did my due diligence, and I was like, is this name already taken? And at that time, I scoured the internet and I couldn't find it. So we jumped with that.
No, you said you're divorced now from her.
Yes.
And you got to keep the name?
You
You got to keep the name of the divorce.
She was very kind of, yeah. As a matter of fact, if you call our main line, the voicemail is actually Sarah. She very well spoken, nice female voice on the other side, and yeah. So she's awesome.
That's
she's
great.
a great person.
That's great. Let me ask you this. I won't. And if it's too much, you just say, "I'm sorry. I won't." Don't share.
Too much.
Did you? Did that have to do with any amount of time of not being able to balance your time between home and doing this work?
That's always a challenge, and that's actually a great piece to talk about, because so many people have this novel, almost fairy tale idea of what it is, what we do. They think you'll wrap up an investigation in an hour's time, and,
Right.
and it's like, no, I'm sorry, there's a lot of work. You're going to really be tired, and that's you. You have to have a very supportive, first off, family, but you also don't want to take advantage of that and sacrifice your marriage or your fatherhood and all that kind of stuff, your job. So yeah, it's something you always got to be aware of and try to figure out how to work it delicately in there, weaving it in and out. I'm sure there was at times she would go, yeah, you sucked as a husband, and it was due to port, maybe because I delved in too much, but that was part of it. It was just kind of trying to recalibrate and always
Reset
and be conscious of it and care about the fact that, okay, they're being supportive of this, but it's also my job to still be a good father and a husband and, yada, yada. So,
You have kids?
yes.
Do they love this?
They do.
I love that.
They have their own little port sweatshirts. And matter of fact, I took them in the middle of last month in February. I took them out to Sumter, Oregon.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, and that was an amazing trip. Not only was it just great because I got to hang with my kids, but we got to explore the same place that the show Sci-Fi's Ghost Mine, also did. But every one of us, we all had a personal experience, and my son being probably the most profound one, he got to actually see a full body apparition.
How old?
He's 12.
Wow.
And my daughter's 10, and we were sitting on the couch in what they call the great room upstairs. We had my iPad out, and we were watching the last episode at that time, number 5 of the 6 in that season, and we were trying to get caught up together. So we were all, on the same page. And we're sitting there watching it, and I know nobody will be able to see this, but like my son just whips over and looks right at me, and he's like in my ear practically, and he's like, "Dad, I just saw a full body apparition." And I'm like, and I'm trying to remain calm because my daughter's anxiety was in the roof. She loves this stuff, but she was
a little ambivalent. I love it, but yeah.
She was fearful big time, and she was like glued to me half the time, and I'm trying to play it off like, oh, what? And
So that is an example of the paranormal bringing families together. Your daughter couldn't.
when you're like, get off me. Yeah.
And so now that we're on to paranormal TV and movies and such, I was in the audience during your speech. I'm watching Paranormal Activity 4 tonight.
Oh, dude, I'm sorry, but I mean, go through that motion, and it was my
Explain, because I wasn't here for it, so, and I don't know if anybody in our audience will have seen that.
Yeah, man. In my humble opinion, Paranormal Activity 1 and 2 were great. I loved them. Number 3 was horrible.
I agree.
And then when they marketed number 4, I was like, wow, that looks creepy. Maybe it'll be good. No. And I went with my brother John, the one that of course, we always do that. And we were both just looking at each other like, and I was like, I want to leave. This is horrible. This is like wretched bad, like horrible. But the one thing they did good, and that was the use of the whole Xbox 360. Like,
And I have a story about that.
Oh.
When you brought that up, and I can't remember who told me this story, but there was somebody's son was playing their Xbox 360 and they had the Kinect going, and his buddy on the other end says, "Who's that person standing behind you?" And he's like, "Well, there's nobody else in my room." And he kind of looked around. There's nobody there, but his friend was seeing somebody standing directly behind him in the room. I wish I knew who told me that story, because when you were talking about it, I was like,
well, when you
it
research
makes perfect
them,
sense to use that.
Yeah, and when you research it online, you'll see countless stories of that exact kind of scenario. Or even when people had it just sitting there in idle mode, and they're kind of waiting, and somebody's using the restroom or popping popcorn or whatever, and then all of a sudden another image of a person, a skeletal, outline shows up on the Xbox screen, and they're like, when they look behind them, there's nobody there.
Right.
So it's beautiful because it's already designed very much in the way that we would want to use it. It's got 3D imaging, which allows us to get that dimensional depth and all that kind of factored in, and then all those I don't remember, millions of trace dots in it. So
which are tracking the movement in the room.
Tracking
correct?
dots actually is
exactly.
Okay. Yeah. So we're going to start trying to work with that more and see how we can incorporate it into paranormal research. You always run into, though, especially when these things were never designed especially for this, there are caveats, and one of them is the media that is used to plug that device in is USB, and USB I think has up to like a 15-foot length before it becomes
it degrades.
And it becomes very spotty. So the challenge then is trying to figure out how do you set it up in an area and then have enough cable to get back to something that's recording it or monitoring it without having a computer in the room running only 15 feet away. So there's things to be done, and advancements to be made. I've seen some forums out there where people are talking about hacking them and being able to take it even further, because that's actually the Kinect has what they call a GNL, the Open GNL. It's the it's like Linux, it's freeware, or many people contribute to developing it. And so I guess there's a lot of that Open GNL out there for the Xbox Kinect too, and they're doing lots of crazy things with it that have nothing to do with paranormal research even. They're turning that actual gadget into.
And I think it would be cool if they had something where it could be done wirelessly, and the image could be like, we just started using tablets in investigation, and I think they're a great tool because. Now we're using the audio software that you can download as an app, which DJs use when they're calibrating their setup. Now we can use it to monitor a room during an EVP session, and it would be neat if there was some sort of way where we could get a wireless signal and be able to use the tablet to, view the image that you're seeing on the Kinect within the same room, and not have to run the cables.
Well, now the Kinect has a mic in it as well, and so I think you can take advantage of that feature. But that's funny you bring that up. Trying to remember her name, Dama, I think is her name here.
Oh yeah.
And she was talking about how she has friends in the music industry, and she was talking about how maybe setting those same mics or whatever that help them figure out the dead spots or where it's really echoey in a room, so they can calibrate their sound system just right to get that perfect studio sound. We can use that in a different way, but using that same technology to help us monitor and record as well. So that's the kind of stuff I like. I really enjoy that, how we adapt and we turn things in, just like taking the tri-field meter and other meters that were never really designed for paranormal research. But over the years we've seen that that correlation and said let's use that, and that's been such a powerful tool for us.
So part of it is it's designed for normal research, and if what it's showing us is abnormal results, then anything can be used for paranormal research. That's
that's true.
flower, right? Like
Right.
going back to the flower technique.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, it's amazing. Especially you look at that trend where you start with traditional, paranormal research and what they use then, and the thought patterns with that up to nowadays, and the things that we're using. But there's also, I think, a little bit of kind of almost like this circling back and trying to fuse, like we did an investigation recently where we wanted to try a new technique where we fused a seance style with our paranormal research, where we had a whole room completely covered in 8 cameras, and we had a round table, and we went kind of through that seance, but we wanted to fuse traditional with modern.
Now, did you use a Ouija board?
Yeah,
For the
two things. I wasn't actually there because I ended up having to be on call for my normal job that actually pays my bills.
what do you do? What is that?
Yeah.
What is that?
I'm a network engineer.
Very cool.
Yep. And then so the client that we had, she had actually been using a Ouija board, and we thought, okay, this might be one of those. For me personally, I've had, and I know this is a very debatable topic, because Ouija boards have been heavily debunked scientifically.
Sure. It was an ideomotor effect, I think, is
exactly.
one thing that
That's
they talk about.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly. But I have had my own personal experiences with Ouija boards that freaked the hell out of me.
Really?
And I can't explain. Of course, I was a kid, so, there's always the potential I more built it up than what it was.
Sure.
But I don't really mess with them myself, per se. So I leave that up to my team if they wanted to, and they kind of did that, and they conducted it. But we kind of blended, the modern with the old. And
I've always been fascinated with doing that type of an experiment.
I want to do more of them, and I want to try to see about how we can incorporate some of the old ways into the new ways, and maybe that'll be just like this little crack in the whole thing that'll help us take it a little bit further forward, which I think would be great.
Well, it's like moving from analog to digital. We lose a lot of manipulability.
Yeah.
And going back to analog, we can go back and do different things that digital can't.
Well, it's like,
We have more control over it.
Yeah, and I know, like, even down to when people talk about, like, preference, some people still very much want to work with a analog, cassette recorder.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that belief is that the actual mechanical end of it is creating its own white noise, so it's like its own built-in white noise generator,
right.
And that helps in turn with that medium for the spirits. So I could see that. And then there's the debate, when you use any kind of digital auto recording, well, what you're doing is you're recording, erasing, recording. And that's why they say with cassettes you always use fresh tapes, because it was more exacerbated. With that happening, where you could have that potential, supposed false positive spirit.
Yeah.
Definitely not the cost-effective format to use.
No, not when you're a nonprofit.
Is there
exactly?
Is there any cost-effective way to do a paranormal investigation group? Because
well, I mean,
it's all out-of-pocket money.
It is, and that's partly how when I designed Port, I said, okay, here's. Well, I started off actually. I didn't have a membership fee, and it was let's bring my friends and coworkers in. All mistakes. Now, some of those people were good people and had best intentions, but it just didn't work, because what happens is they're leveraging their relationship with you, and it never winds out paying off for the client. So I started researching all these other groups out there that had been doing this for a long time, and I saw that they were actually charging membership fees. So that's when I did that, and I was like, not only that, you're building your own sustainability. You're being able to put the money right back into to the group and purchase your own gear. And then that way, it's not like when Bob leaves, dang, there goes half our gear,
Well, and it also, what people pay money into, they're gonna, it means it's more important to them.
Yeah, well,
they're gonna make it a priority.
I look at them like shareholders, stockholders, and stuff. So, and that just goes as far as to with their input and their If they want to pay us a yearly fee and not really be that involved, I mean, well, I guess that's
Fine.
that's your deal. But most people aren't like that. They're
No.
like, I'm giving you money, I want to be involved. So
Yep.
you know, that's good.
And that was my question: was when you're setting that, do you do an annual fee or is it a monthly
Annual.
fee or a buy? Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to. Well, the last thing I want to be is an accountant, and that's the other thing. I've had people in the past, due to financial, just budgeting and things like that. They're
Sure.
like, "How about I give you $20, every so often until I get up to that, membership fee amount?" And I'm like,
Right.
I don't want to do that. Just you collect it, and when you get to that point, you've got it all. That's
What's your membership fee?
$100 every year.
That's not bad.
No, and
Ours is 1,000.
nice. I was thinking about adding a couple zeros on ours.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's only him and I who are members.
You guys are rich.
Yeah, right. Rich in spirits.
So yeah, I just try to make sure that I avoid having to track money as much as possible.
Yeah.
It makes it a lot easier. But managing or running a nonprofit doesn't have to be expensive. There are a lot of other tools. Luckily nowadays, in 2013, we've got a lot of things going in our favor, like Gmail and things like that, where
Right.
they come with their own suite of all sorts of things that help you be able to run a nonprofit with no cost.
Right.
So that's definitely helped bring it down.
I know they have like the like Amazon affiliate programs,
Yes.
and YouTube has got this thing where you place ads before your videos, and if someone
really?
clicks, I think you get like a percentage of that or something.
Oh,
wow! We haven't really looked into it, but it seems to be working for.
I didn't know about the YouTube one. I definitely
Yeah.
took advantage of the Amazon affiliate. I've never made any money, but
yeah.
Yeah.
it's just like I tell people all the time. I'm like, Port really is funded by membership fees and donations. To date, we've only had one donation.
Yeah.
As far as from
Whose parent?
It's funny you mentioned that. But yeah, it's just one of those deals. We had to figure out a way. How are we going to do that? Because
Yeah.
I've talked with a lot of great, folks here this weekend, and they have their own way of doing it. And some of those groups are like, "Yeah, I own everything,"
Right.
And it's like, what happens when you either decide to move on or you get hit by a bus or
Right.
whatever, I mean, legally, people can't say, well, now they're gone, it's mine.
Right.
Because, it's not.
Unless
So-
you will it. I've
Or
willed,
that.
I've willed Casey all my stuff.
Did you?
No.
That's like...
This is now my will and testament.
So
Hey, tell me something about. I'm sorry. Tell me something about Paranormal, Occult, and Research Team.
Paranormal and occult.
And
research.
occult.
Yeah.
So what work do you do with the occult?
So, well, the one thing I think happens a lot of times is people think of occult as just being like, witchcraft or those kind of things. Occult is like this parent word for the unknown, essentially. And so it can embody a lot of different things, from Wiccan to black magic to
Ouija?
Well,
Does that
Ouija
fall into that or no?
Well, Ouija would be more of a technique,
Right.
a tool almost used in it, but it could, it could definitely be correlated. Like Druidism and stuff like that,
yeah.
Can definitely fall in those. It also is open to opinion and interpretation
Right.
as well. So there is that.
What would be a practical explanation of something that you've done in the field with the occult? Have you gone
Great,
into?
yeah. So we had another group contact us about 3 years ago about a case, and we were actually in the midst of one, and they said this involves a child, but we're really slammed, and we need somebody that's available that can jump on this. So we said yes, we'll take it, and we knew that it was all the way down in Klamath Falls.
Oh,
And this is January.
and you're in Portland. You're located in Portland. Wow.
So we pack up, and that's one of the things we'll do. I developed 8 phases that I felt like a case should go through. So usually we try to do all our research and everything in advance. So that way we get knowledgeable about the land, the clients, the home, anything that we can figure out. But in this case, we'll circumvent that because there's a child, there's a very necessary need, and there was a threat. Yeah. So the client's claim was there's all these shadow figures. They found this ring with a star on it, and they think it was what they call a pentagram. Mind you, I'm keywording this exactly like they worded it to us. Yep. So we're like, all right, we're going to definitely be tapping into some occult, practices or something tied to it. We travel. It ended up being like 8 hours in snow-packed roads over the mountain into Cave Falls. We get there because it was 8 hours away. We also weren't afforded the ability to do what we call a walkthrough, and that's where we get to meet them in the day, interview them. You get that dynamic of who they are,
right?
Smell their home.
Yes.
Know how stinky they are.
I'll tell you, that's the drawback.
Yeah. Well, this would have been very enlightening had we had that opportunity, though we did not. Yes. So we get there, and they decide they're going to stay in a hotel that night, and we have written documentation that, they say, we give you permission to be here while we're not here, yada, yada. So we're setting up, and as we're setting up, my team's finding loaded weapons in corners of the house, and I'm like, that's not right. And I had noticed when we walked up to the house, there was a surveillance camera trained on the door, and I'm like, okay. And then we get up into the master bedroom, we're running, lines around, and
it's an investigation within investigation,
right? And we see the TV, the monitor that's actually watching that, and we turn it on, and sure enough, it's powered and actually watching the front door. We're like, So then we get going on the investigation. And, mind you, they'd said, they did not dabble in any kind of witchcraft, black magic, any kind of dark arts of any sorts. My team is tracking down this extremely high EMF field, and they actually find a hidden door off the master bedroom to walk in and find the grow room. And I'm like,
that's not a cult. That's
no, I'm not there yet.
That's reggae.
Yeah, right. Well, we knew,
Rastafarian.
we figured that was going to be the factor because they had tapestries everywhere, and it was. And again, had we done the walkthrough, we would have been aware of that in advance. But here we are, and we're like, oh, great, thanks for putting us in a situation like this. So
yeah, seriously, now you're in a very legal situation, huh?
Yeah. And I had a correctional officer on my team, so that was very precarious for him. And we weren't very happy, to say the least. But so where the occult tied in was, mind you, they had this elaborate, explanation of the kind of figures, and that they felt like there was some kind of dark entity, and they were finding that ring. She said she found in the windowsill of the house, and it had a pentagram on it, which she showed us when we got there.
This is the case you were telling me about yesterday.
Yes.
Okay.
And my investigators are going along taking pictures, and he looks and he sees under the TV in the master bedroom a stack of books from the library. And what are they? They're books on black magic, devil worshipping, talking to the dead. I can't remember. I've got the picture somewhere. And on the covers of the book is a pentagram. And I'm like, and you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So we quickly discerned what was going on. They were fooling around, probably because they were getting really high and, enjoying their Rastafarian lifestyle. And it invited probably some things in that freaked them out.
Did you find some evidence of actual activity?
Stuff. We didn't have any anything I feel like really strongly was evidence, but we did find a couple times we had some shadow play going on. And then we have a photo anomaly that I more chalk up as pareidolia, where, it looks like a face, but I think it's really just the pattern in the wood. So, we really, because of the way things went down, we were like, this is a learning lesson, and
we've had a few of those.
Yeah.
One. We've only had one. We've only learned one lesson.
Not to make that mistake again. Yeah.
So how much weed did you guys take? No, I'm just kidding.
I think there was only a couple bales.
Yeah, seriously. We could only get that in the car back.
My correctional officer friend, he couldn't get many in his back of his trunk. So. He's like, this is confiscation.
He had to drop all his police-issued rifles on the ground there in order to make more room for the weed that he was taking home. Right.
We were so appalled. We were just like, I cannot believe this. So when we were kind of done, I wrapped up everything very nice and professional. I said, here's what we think. And it was my way of saying, you are screwing around with things and then lying to people. If you really want help, you need to be forthright.
Yes.
And then they were like, well, we still need help. I said, well, we're too far away at this point, and knowing what we know about your guys' case, we don't feel comfortable moving forward.
Or then this is the other question, do you refer them to somebody else? I wouldn't feel comfortable putting another group in that position either.
We had that internal discussion, and we decided to, actually tell them, go ahead, and we'll try to ask another group if they want to. So we reached out to a group right in Klamath Falls, but we gave them every bit of information we knew.
Right.
We said, here's everything we learned about this case. Yeah, and I want you guys to be aware in advance that we had this going on with the client. So, So, whether or not they did take on the case or not, I don't know. I wasn't really too concerned at that point.
At that point, you're good.
So, what was your masterful experience? What was the experience that said,
we heard someone who referred to it as an aha moment today.
Yeah. Take on me. Aha. Take on me.
Yeah.
Take on. Pencil sketch.
I was waiting for you guys to pick that one up. All right.
I got it. I just didn't want to touch it.
Right. No. Without going into a lot of detail, and I'll explain why. I had an event happen when I was 10 years old in Longview, Washington, that actually has to do with an unsolved murder to date. I'm actually, meth view. I admit it. Not that I've ever done it.
Yeah, no.
For the record, I am not a drug addict.
today?
Just recreational. Just recreational.
So, the reason why I can't go into a lot of detail is because I'm actually circling back now on that. And so I'll try to be generic, and you have to forgive me for doing that, but there's good reason for it.
Sure.
There was this guy, and he had this thing happen.
One time.
Next story.
Right? And I was scared. That's it. I had been living in a duplex, and I had, out of nowhere, an entity come to me in the middle of the night, and I remember I was laying on my side, and I felt almost like a breeze, like somebody had opened up a window, and I felt this breeze on the back of my neck, and my bed was butted up so kindly of my parents to butt it up right next to the closet door.
Right.
I mean, I'm talking 2-3 inches from that door. So, at any rate, I feel this breeze, I roll over, and I actually see my closet door, which I obviously made very sure of at the age of 10, to close and was latched.
Because you'd seen Poltergeist.
Exactly. I did not want to go towards the light.
You were not welcome.
Yeah. Right. So I see this entity, and what it was a girl. Oh. And she had a patch over her eye, and she was wearing a dress, and she was... interesting. I just got showed a picture of a business card that is relatively similar, except for the antlers. I don't think she had those.
She didn't have antlers.
Wasn't the yak woman.
No, yeah, right. But she's rolling her fingers at me, but she's not saying anything. So she's
rolling her fingers as if to come towards you.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And she's telepathically talking to me, saying, "Come with me, come to me." And of course,
older woman, younger woman,
a teenager, young teenager,
with a patch.
Yeah, that in the long run ended up, we think, being a symbolic thing.
Okay,
or at least that's the best explanation we could come up with. But of course, I was mortified. I realized, and she's doing she's just kind of. See through and
wispy.
Yeah, exactly. And things are kind of flowing, just moving around like there's a light breeze.
Your recreational drug use was definitely. Yeah.
I don't want to talk about that again. I roll over and I don't know what to do. And you're that scared where you can't scream, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
So finally I get that courage up. And of course, when I finally do bolt out of bed, all you see is ass and elbows. I'm just screaming high hell. And Wah!
Right.
I think that's pretty much it, right? Well,
I want you to be able to, I want our viewers to be able to see that picture of just you with ass and elbows.
Right.
You know, we need to take for our website a picture of your elbows and ass now, just so people can see it.
and this has been running. We ended up. It piqued everybody's interest in the home because they saw the conviction in my face. They saw how mortified I was, and because of, like I told you earlier, very open to that stuff. They realized this was not just a bad dream. We need to look into this. So we started researching, and what we actually found in the local library was a girl in an adjacent duplex, right in the same set of duplexes I was living in, was actually murdered only a couple years prior when she went to a party. And was raped and murdered, and the guy got off scot-free because they didn't think he was the murderer, but in fact, I believe he was. So, anyways.
Was it a costume party? Was it a Halloween party? Was it a... With the patch? I'm wondering what kind of party it was.
That's a great question, but I want to say she died in the spring, so I'm having a hard time seeing why she would have a patch on, and she had both her eyes. I mean, nothing even happened to them.
Maybe even lazy eye. They use patches to correct.
Could have been, yeah.
I'm just spitballing here.
Yeah, no, that's they're great thoughts. Things I hadn't even come to think about at this point. But yeah, that was probably my biggest aha. Now they had moved me away from that closet, and we had actually talked with a medium and a psychic, and what they'd come to realize was she had reached out to me because, for one, she was in limbo. She was kind of stuck, and she was lonely and wanted me to go. Now, the question right after that was, well, what would have happened if I would have said, okay, I'll go with you?
Right.
They said, well, as far as medical explanation or any kind of scientific, you would have had like some kind of grand mal seizure or something, and you would have been a vegetable. Your soul would have been gone with her. Your physical shell would have remained. Your body would have probably operated, but you'd have just been a vegetable, is what they concluded.
Insidious.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Very much. Yeah. So they moved me, and they were so kind to put my sister by the closet instead, which she hated me for.
His sister is now at the mental hospital in a coma for the last 30 years.
Yep, she was in that movie Devil Inside.
Yeah.
No, nothing happened to her. She just was freaked out, and that sucked for her. And but after I was moved away from there, things calmed down. And we didn't stay there long because, remember, I told you we moved a lot.
Yeah.
Running from drug lords.
Yes. Well, now we know why.
Right.
It's all coming.
All the grow rooms.
They were trying to get you to do more, and you're like, no, recreation.
Man, I'm only
come
10.
on, I'm 10 years old. You're
I
running
wanna
from
read comics.
you're like, they gave me a bad dose, and I had this ghost come and talk to me.
Exactly. Nobody likes a bad trip, man.
No.
So,
I almost became comatose.
That was my aha.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so that's what you've been into. That's what kind of propelled you into this field, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I've had other experiences as I grew up. I even had experiences even before that, but that one I would say was definitely the real. The most concrete thing that could happen to me, and said that there is something real behind what's going on here, and I'm very skeptical to date. I as I was trying to explain to somebody, I can't remember who it was, I tried to shed because I am a believer, so I try to shed that when I go into a case in an investigation, because I don't want that to really influence me. I want to go in there and I want to try to figure out what's going on, what can be explained, and then what can't be after that point. Then we need to look at that closer, dissect it, analyze it, and see if we can,
We talked to Neil McNeill earlier today, who's a parapsychologist.
Yep.
And, he employs different psychics and mediums. And you talked about when you were young, they brought a psychic in or a medium in. And
We went and talked to him. Yeah,
does Port use?
we do.
Do you?
Yeah, but so the way I have it structured is you have members. They're the people that pay the membership fees. So they're privy to case, all the case specifics. We try to uphold almost like a HIPAA, if you're familiar.
Yeah.
HIPAA compliant.
I'm not only HIPAA compliant, I'm FERPA.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, school counselor.
Okay, very well. Yeah. So we try to do that for our clients as well, and provide that anonymity or that privacy that we feel is their right. So then I was like, well, then how do I deal with like folks that are gonna, we may go to it for a forensic analysis of something further, or a psychic medium, clairvoyant of sorts. I was like, then let's do consultants, so we can a la carte it. We can just say, here, take this, here's that.
Consultations. Yeah.
Right. So if you would have been here earlier when I did the Q&A at the very end of my talk, William had asked me, his general question that he asked everybody, what's your favorite, either being positive or negative experience, paranormal investigating. And I talked about a case down in Sublimity, Oregon, where we worked with a psychic medium, and that was amazing because the rule is I don't give them any information, and I leave them completely in the dark. It's not because I'm always trying to say I want to prove that you're not a fraud, but at the same time I want to make sure that we can not influence them, make them biased, and let them use the gifts they were given to corroborate other things that we know. So we use them.
It could also, if you were dealing with somebody who was a fraud, it could affect your group. It could affect the credibility of your group.
Right.
Well, and the other thing
and
is,
unfortunately, there's a large amount of them out there, and that's unfortunate.
And the other piece is you said you don't share any. I'm assuming that's beyond where they might get injured. If you would share information with them if there was some kind of danger or something in the home.
So I would
share that with them.
You're talking like if you're dealing with a malevolent or
something like that.
Okay. If I felt like that was a factor, or if I was even privy to knowing that, I would generically tell them, look, this is a case that potentially may have demonic,
something to harm.
Yeah, or malevolent. I would preface them on that, so they were forewarned.
Right. Without needing to go into specifics.
No, like when we took, this.
I just wanted to make sure that was clear, because I wouldn't want a psychic go, wait a minute, I'm going to go work with this guy.
A jerk! I got smacked all night long, like I was in an American Haunting.
No. Tell us about the members in your group. Tell us what they do. How many members do you guys have? And
currently we have 7. They're all physicists and scientists. Rocket scientists.
Rocket scientists.
No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. So are we.
They're all.
It's just no one's reading our data.
They're all probably smarter than me. I try to be selective in ways. And Casey and I were just talking about this yesterday. He's doing something way better than I am, but at any rate,
what is that?
I don't know. He's still got a lot of the same members. So
I was just telling him our turnover rate
is like next to nil.
We're just afraid to tell them to go.
Right. They're like that guy in Office Space with the stapler.
Yeah,
we're going to have you go to the basement and do.
We just stopped paying them and they keep showing up.
They're going to burn down the building. I hope you know that.
That's okay.
So,
as long as it's our building and not a client's.
Right. I do, though. I try to, be a little bit strategic in bringing on people that I feel like bring something to the table that we don't have. I've got, people who have sleep study background or RN. I have folks who are historians. People that have, a background in, like massage and things like that. But, you may not think that would play in, but knowing how the physical body interacts with that physical, end of things, I think it does play in at points.
Right.
But, and then there's myself. I've got a large background to radio frequency and telecommunications.
Which is a huge thing.
Right. So, I'm grateful for the mixture of people I have.
And hold on a sec. We're doing a radio show. Can you guys just say your names real quick? What's your name? What is it? Reed?
She's
Brianna?
shy.
They're shy. They're shy. We're at the Oregon Ghost Conference and we're talking. And you're Tina? Keena. Hi, Keena. Hi, Reed? Brianna.
You guys have the most beautiful blue eyes. I love it.
Are you guys ghost hunters? Yeah? Have you hunted any ghosts? No? Not yet? Awesome.
I like how you're boxing there.
Yeah, well, that's how you take out a ghost.
Rock'em sock'em
That's how we
ghost
do it.
bots.
All right. Did you guys have a good time here? Awesome. All right. Can you say hi? Say hi. No, you don't want to say hi. All right. Thank you. I just wanted to bring you up. Thanks. Sorry about that.
No worries. Kids are awesome. I love it.
Well, I think before
As we have another one peeking through
Peeking
the window.
through the window. Yeah. So you have. How do you retain? I'm sorry, I missed some of that.
Well, we don't really retain. We
You have much turnover.
Yeah,
Because who
unfortunately.
could work with a guy like you?
God,
it's the
I
management.
must be a jerk, man. I'm sure a lot of them would say that, though.
You will set up this camera now.
No soup for you. Yeah. My intention, honestly, like I was telling Casey yesterday, is when I bring on somebody, I intend for them to stay forever. I feel like not only does Port help you further your interest in this field of research, but also I think it helps us all become better people, whether it's professionally, just personally, because those are things that we all have to do. We have to try to push forward as a professional, and personal, interaction with the client is a must. You can't be abrasive or brash or condescending and dismissive. Those are attributes I do not want. So I try to make sure, because I tell my team all the time, we're a support group, really. These poor people are terrified and willing to walk away from a mortgage payment, or it's tearing up relationships, affecting their job performance. So
when they're willing to call people like us in, that's when
when you know they're desperate.
Yeah.
Most of the calls Casey gets for this or anything else is usually because people are desperate.
Right.
So,
well, and
I
usually
end up calling them every day. So
I'm usually forgetting to remove the rubber band from around my arm, and
recreation, just recreation.
I'm really joking, people.
So
before I got some questions. Go. How do you do your research? What is it when you go in? How do you and then how do you go over your evidence?
I just figured out what's going on here. You guys are trying to figure out all my secrets, aren't you?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
what's your PIN number?
1 1 1.
1
knew it.
2 3 4 5.
Yeah.
1 2 3 4 5. That's some kind of idiot's suitcase. There's just, Spaceballs. I'm trying to quote Spaceballs.
No, hey, that's good. That's good. She's gone from suck to blow. Where were we?
Isn't this fun? Isn't this fun? And hopefully they think it's fun too, whoever's trying to listen to this.
Right.
Research and
that's it.
Evidence.
I have no memory anymore. Must be the recreational
Recreation.
drugs. So, what we do is we try to exhaust every avenue we can tap into. And that could be the obvious, online, local, being City Hall, historical societies, libraries.
Do you have somebody in your team that does that, or is that you?
The way I look at it is we have core members and non-core members. If you're an investigator, you're a core member. You're involved from the beginning to end of a case. So you wear all those hats, researcher, analyst, all that. But if you're just a researcher or an analyst, which would be a non-core position, you're only involved in the particular phases that's really needed. So for a researcher, yes, they would do that, and that would be all they focus on is just research.
Just a research person.
Right.
Okay.
I try to tell people all the time, too, that, there's going to be windshield time sometimes. You're going to have to drive. The case may be in, Bonneville or in, the Dalles or something. Yeah. You're going to have to get in your car and drive there. As almighty as the internet is, it does not have everything.
Nope.
And not only that, sometimes just getting in front of people and talking to them is great. A lot of people even overlook this, especially when you're trying to look for traumatic events and things. They may overlook going and actually talking to the local police department about, deaths, murders, any of that kind of stuff. That is public information that we are, allowed to, have. So
I want to take a moment here and just say that as the conference is starting to wind down, it's very. I find it really amusing that they're doing the raffle drawing and everyone's silent in the entire room. You can only hear Ben talking.
and that's because I have a really loud, obnoxious voice that carries. But
it's great. It's great for a radio show.
And everybody over there heard you say from suck to blow.
Oh, there's that.
They wondered what this was about.
What kind of radio show are these guys doing?
He's got some new technology that sucks and blows. It's an EMF pump. Don't worry about it.
Right. It's an ion blaster.
It's what is it? It's the trap. It sucks and blows.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I think before we let you go, I want you to plug your group. How we or clients, anybody gets a hold of you, and.
So we have our website, and actually off the website you can get all of our social network site like Facebook. We still even have a MySpace. We have Twitter.
Logged in last year.
Yeah. Oh really? Nice. I'll tap in every 2 to 3 months, but that's about it.
MySpace?
Yeah. We keep it just because you never know. They're actually trying to make a comeback right now. They have a new.
I heard Beta is too. So.
Dude, I'm going for Laserdisc. Come on, man.
Hey, I just got rid of 2 Laserdisc players.
Oh wow.
But not the Laserdiscs themselves.
But you didn't get rid of your porn collection, did you?
No.
That was on Laserdisc.
No, I continue to have that, yeah. Now I just spin it really fast and I look at it.
You guys are going to edit that last part out, I'm sure.
Well, that implied that I had a porn collection, which,
Right.
Yeah. I was, when Laserdisc came out, I was 8.
So? You were saying I was doing drugs at 10.
Touche. Yeah, but you were living in Longview. Everybody was doing drugs.
I was living the life.
I think we're going to have to spend the next 10 minutes apologizing to, I'm sorry, Longview, I don't really believe you.
Sorry, Linda Blair.
Linda Blair, I'm sorry.
Sorry, passport No, I'm not. Anyways, okay. Our website is www.paranormaloccultresearch.com. There's links for our Twitter, our YouTube, our MySpace, Facebook, so on and so forth.
Address, phone number.
Yeah, well, so I won't give my address because that's my house. But our phone number,
I'll give it later.
Right? You could probably Google
if you have any issues with this podcast, please contact Ben.
Why am I getting hate mail?
He usually gets home.
What's that all about?
He drives a late model
To Mr. Suck to Blow. Oh my God, you guys aren't even going to play this.
Someone's going to listen to it anyway.
Yeah, right.
So.
I'm going to listen to it.
We got a membership of 1 now.
This is good radio.
Right. Our main line number is 503-941-0289.
Say it again slowly for the people writing it down.
5.
Suck to blow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Awesome.
It's 503-941-0289.
There you go.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And you don't charge for investigations?
Absolutely not. We're registered in the state of Washington and Oregon, and we will full-blown be registered with the IRS as a nonprofit 501c3, charitable scientific research.
Taxes, audits, all the good stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Legitimized.
If you're an IRS agent, please audit this man right now, both personally and professionally.
Right. And if you're the DEA, please investigate this man. Awesome. You ain't going to find anything.
There's nothing out there. There's nothing out. Ben, and I think we talked about this during our first episode, web podcast a couple days ago. We ran out of time. We're just like, we were spitballing, trying to come up with stuff.
Sure.
And so one of the drops we had was, and we might add it here at some point in post, is the Ben, the Michael Jackson Ben.
Oh yeah.
That was, and there was a little squirrel eating a nut. And that'll always, for whatever reason, that'll always be connected.
You know, it's better than some of the ones I've heard about my name. So I mean, my cousins have a very loving way to refer to me, and yeah. I've heard worse.
And it's called Meep. I'm
Yeah,
sorry, we had to
exactly.
cut that out.
Exactly.
You're at least lucky you weren't named Billie Jean.
That's true. Because
you'd-
everywhere I would have walked, the sidewalk would have lit up on me, and that's just
and you would never.
annoying.
They would always say, "Not my lover." And that's just
Or
sad.
even worse, you're getting hit or pelted with tennis balls.
true.
I don't get that.
I went there, Billie Jean King,
Yeah,
tennis pro from 1920.
I don't remember exactly, but I have.
1920. She's still alive, dude.
I don't know. She might be alive.
Anywho. Awesome. And you do residences, commercial. You do everything, anything.
Yeah.
You go anywhere in Oregon, obviously.
Oregon and Washington.
Oregon and Washington. Do you mainly stick to Portland? Do you try and stick to Portland, or?
I would say the way it's been about 90-10. 90% of our cases come right out of the greater Vancouver, Portland area. And that's not because we're only trying to stay here. It's just that it just happens that way. And then the other 10% has been outside of that. Opportunities sometimes, to go investigate neat, places. But we always prioritize residential over any commercial.
Yeah.
Because they're the real, the client.
We'd love to have you on an investigation, go on an investigation with
fun.
you, all that stuff. And
Yeah.
we'd definitely love to have you come back on and do a podcast with us again.
Sweet.
So
Yeah, no.
I'm speaking for Casey on this one, but I'm telling you.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to sit down with you guys. And, if I can help your ratings go down, that's
Yes,
great.
yes.
So
That's what we're looking for.
How can you go down in your zero?
that's true.
Trying to drop those ratings into a negative number.
I don't know if we can do that.
Plug your group again.
Paranormal and Occult Research Team.
Awesome.
On web everywhere.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Google
Ben.
us.
Awesome.
All right, man. Thanks a
Thanks,
lot,
dude.
guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
They're here.